The rain never stopped on Illustrious 7. It had fallen for 300 years and would fall for 300 more. Barry Marin had grown used to its endless drumming against the bioshelter dome, a rhythm that had become the soundtrack to his exile. 5 years ago, the Conquest government had stripped him of his credentials, his citizenship, and his freedom for daring to research genes that might evolve sentience. Now, he lived alone in this translucent bubble of artificial life, growing plants that glowed in the perpetual twilight, tending to ecosystems that meant nothing to anyone but him. The morning began like every other. Barry checked the hydroponics, adjusted the pH levels in the nutrient streams, and counted the ripening fruits on his experimental vines. That's when he noticed something odd. 3 of the luminescent berries he'd been monitoring were missing. Not fallen, not withered, simply gone. And there, in the soft moss beneath the vine, was a tiny footprint. Barry knelt, studying the impression. Too small for an adult, too precise for any of the native creatures. His pulse quickened. In 5 years, he'd never encountered another living soul on this abandoned research station. The Conquest had made sure of that. He spent the rest of the day searching, finding more prints leading toward the storage units, then vanishing near the waste recycling systems. Someone, or something, had been living in the shadows of his world. 3 days later, Barry was adjusting the atmospheric processors when he heard it, a small cough, barely audible above the rain. He turned to find a child standing at the entrance to the greenhouse sector, no more than 6 years old, with skin that seemed to shimmer slightly in the bioluminescent light. "Tree man," she said, pointing at him with a berry-stained finger. Barry's voice caught in his throat. He hadn't spoken to another person in years. I'm Barry. Who are you?" "Kra," the child replied, then added matter-of-factly, "You grow the good berries. The ones that don't make me sick." Before Barry could respond, a woman's voice called from beyond the airlock. "Kra, where did you?" The voice broke off as its owner appeared, a woman in her 30s, wearing clothes that had clearly been mended many times. Her eyes, the same unusual color as her daughter's, widened with fear upon seeing Barry. "Please," she said, pulling Kra behind her. "We meant no harm. We've been careful. We only took what we needed." Barry raised his hand slowly. "It's all right. I'm not with the Conquest. I'm an exile, like you." The woman's posture relaxed slightly, but her grip on Kra remained firm. "I'm Miari. This is my daughter. We've been hiding in the abandoned sections for weeks. The biosystems there failed months ago. You've been living in the dark zones?" Barry's scientific mind immediately cataloged the dangers. Toxic spore colonies, radiation leaks, structural collapse. "That's incredibly dangerous." Niari's jaw tightened. "Less dangerous than being found." Barry understood. The Conquest had strict regulations about genetic purity. Kra's slightly iridescent skin and unusual eye color marked her as what the authorities called a deviation. Such children weren't just rejected, they were eliminated. "You can't go back there," Barry heard himself saying. "The secondary life support will fail within days at this rate. You'll both die." Niari's eyes filled with a desperate hope that made Barry's chest tighten. "Then, might we stay here, just for a few days? Until I can figure out where else to go." Barry looked at the child, who was studying him with curious, intelligent eyes. No fear, just interest. When was the last time anyone had looked at him without fear or contempt? "I have food," he said finally, "and clean water. The guest quarters still function, though I've never used them." That night, Barry prepared a meal for 3 instead of 1. He watched Kra examine everything with scientific precision, asking questions about the glowing plants, the recycling systems, the artificial weather patterns. Her mother ate slowly, as if unsure the food might vanish. "You're not originally from Illustrious 7, Barry observed. Niari shook her head. "We're from Concordia Prime. I had a position in the archives. Historical preservation." She glanced at her daughter. "When Kra was born, when they saw what she was, I had 2 choices. Let them take her or run. And her father chose his reputation over his daughter." The words were flat, emotionless, but Barry saw the pain beneath them. Kra had fallen asleep at the table, her small head resting against her mother's arm. In the soft light of the bioluminescent fixtures, both mother and daughter looked ethereal, like creatures from ancient myths. "I need to ask you something," Niari said suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Something that might sound insane." Barry waited. "Marry me." The words hung in the air like suspended rain. Barry blinked, certain he'd misheard. "Under conquest law," Niari continued quickly, "a child born within a registered union is automatically granted provisional citizenship, regardless of genetic markers. It's an old statute, rarely used, but it's never been repealed. If you were my husband, Kra would be legally recognized as your daughter. She'd have rights. Protection." Barry's mind reeled. "You're asking me to? But we don't even know each other. I know you gave us food when you could have turned us in. I know you see my daughter as a person, not a deviation. That's more than most would offer." Niari's eyes were fierce now, a mother's desperation burning bright. "I'm not asking for love. I'm asking for a chance at life." Barry looked at the sleeping child, at her small hand curled into a fist, still clutching a luminescent flower she'd picked earlier. No child should have to hide just to exist. "Yes," he said, the word surprising him as much as it did Niari. "Yes, I'll do it." The following days blurred together in a strange new rhythm. Barry had lived alone for so long that sharing his space felt like learning to breathe underwater. But gradually patterns emerged. Niari proved to be organized and efficient, taking over the kitchen systems and somehow making the recycled proteins taste better than they ever had. Kra followed Barry like a shadow, absorbing everything he taught her about the plants, the systems, the delicate balance that kept their small world alive. But on the fourth day, Kra developed a fever. Barry found Niari cradling her daughter in the medical bay, the child's skin flushed and damp. "She's never been sick before," Niari whispered. "Not like this." Barry ran diagnostics, checked vital signs, analyzed blood samples. The results made his stomach drop. Kra's hybrid physiology was rejecting the standard proteins in their food supply. Her body needed specific enzymes that simply didn't exist in their current stores. "I can synthesize what she needs," Barry said, already moving to the biolab. "But it'll take time." "Do we have time?" Barry met Niari's eyes. "I don't know." For 36 hours, Barry worked without sleep. His hands remembered the delicate dance of genetic manipulation, the precise art of biological engineering that had once been his life's work. Niari stayed by his side, monitoring Kra's condition, adjusting 4 lines, speaking soft words of encouragement in a language Barry didn't recognize. When the enzyme solution was finally ready, Barry's hands shook as he prepared the injection. One mistake, one miscalculation, and he could kill the child instead of saving her. "Do it," Niari said, her hand steady on his arm. "I trust you." The next 12 hours were the longest of Barry's life. But slowly, miraculously, Kra's fever broke. Her breathing eased. When she finally opened her eyes and asked for water, both adults sagged with relief. "Thank you," Niari whispered, and impulsively kissed Barry's cheek. It was the first human touch he'd felt in 5 years that wasn't clinical or violent. He stood frozen as she pulled away, embarrassed. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." "It's okay," Barry said quickly. It's okay." That night, as Kra slept peacefully for the first time in days, Barry found Niari in the observation deck, staring out at the endless rain. "I've been running for 3 years," she said without turning. "Kra doesn't even know what a real home looks like." Barry joined her at the window. "I've been hiding for 5. I'd almost forgotten what it felt like to matter to someone." Niari looked at him, then really looked at him. "Why did you say yes to the marriage?" Barry considered lying, making up something noble or logical. Instead, he told the truth. "Because I'm tired of being alone. And because—" he struggled for words. "Because no child should have to apologize for existing." Niari's eyes glistened. "Kra asked me yesterday if you were her father now. I didn't know what to tell her." "What do you want to tell her?" "The truth. That you're the first person who's ever made us feel safe." The moment shattered as alarms suddenly blazed through the dome. Barry's blood went cold as he recognized the signature. Conquest enforcement vessels, approaching fast. "They found us," Niari breathed, terror replacing the softness in her eyes. Barry's mind raced. The dome's defensive systems were minimal, designed for weather and wildlife, not military assault. But he'd spent 5 years modifying the facility, creating hiding places, false walls, signal scramblers. "Get Kra," he ordered. "Meet me in the core laboratory." Now, as Niari ran for their quarters, Barry accessed the facility's central computer. His fingers flew over the controls, activating protocols he'd hoped never to use. The dome's signature began to shift, matching the background radiation of the planet's surface. To his scanning systems, they would appear as just another abandoned ruin. Niari appeared with a sleepy Kra in her arms. "What are you doing?" "Hiding us in plain sight. But it won't last long. They'll do a visual inspection next." Barry pulled up the registration database. "We need to complete the marriage contract. Now." But the waiting period, emergency provisions, threat to life. Barry's hands moved faster. "If they scan us as a legal family unit, their own protocols will protect us, at least temporarily." The computer chirped, requesting biometric confirmation. Barry pressed his palm to the scanner, then gestured for Niari to do the same. As her hand touched the surface, their eyes met. "Are you sure?" she asked. "Are you?" Niari didn't hesitate. "Yes." The scanner flashed green. In the eyes of Conquest Law, they were now husband and wife. The enforcement team arrived like predators, sleek in their biosuits, weapons charged and ready. Barry met them at the main airlock, his newly registered status as a married exile prominent on his identification broadcast. "Dr. Barry Marin," the lead officer said, her voice filtered through her helmet. "We've had reports of unauthorized life signs in this sector." "Just my wife and daughter," Barry replied, surprised at how easily the words came. "They arrived last week, all properly documented." The officer's scanner swept over him, then passed him to where Niari stood with Kra. Barry saw the moment the device registered their legal status. The officer's posture shifted from aggressive to merely suspicious. "The child appears to have non-standard genetic markers," the officer noted. "My daughter has a registered medical condition," Barry said smoothly. "All paperwork is in order. We're in full compliance with the exile provisions, Section 94. The officers exchanged glances. Barry knew they were running calculations. The paperwork would check out, the law was clear, but something felt wrong to them. Their training warred with their instincts. Finally, the lead officer lowered her weapon. "We'll be back in 72 hours for a full facility inspection. Ensure all documentation is available for review." They left as quickly as they'd come, their ship disappearing into the perpetual storm. Barry's legs nearly gave out as the airlock sealed. 72 hours, Niari said quietly. "Then what?" "Then we'll be ready," Barry replied, though he had no idea how. That night, they sat together in the main living area, Kra coloring with bioluminescent dyes while her parents, the words still felt strange, watched. "You know," Niari said suddenly, "in all of this, we never had a proper ceremony." Barry looked at her, confused. "The marriage," she clarified. "It was all very clinical." Kra looked up from her drawing. "Mama, does this mean Barry is my papa now?" The adults exchanged glances. Niari nodded slowly. "If you want him to be." Kra considered this with the seriousness only a 6-year-old could manage. Then she stood, walked to Barry, and held out a small black stone she'd been carrying. "This is my treasure," she announced. "Papa can have it." Barry took the stone with the gravity it deserved. "Thank you, Kra. I'll keep it safe." The child beamed, then climbed into his lap as if she'd been doing it all her life. Barry sat stunned as she resumed her coloring, completely at ease. "I think," Niari said softly, "that's better than any ceremony." The next morning, Barry woke to find Niari already in the kitchen, Kra helping her sort through storage containers. "We're organizing," Kra informed him seriously. "Mama says a family needs proper breakfast." Barry watched them work, mother and daughter moving in easy synchronization. When had his sterile, isolated existence become this warm, living thing? "Barry," Niari's voice pulled him from his thoughts. "Could you check the atmospheric processors?" They made an odd noise earlier. It was such a normal domestic request that it made his chest ache. "Of course." As he worked, Barry could hear them talking, asking endless questions about the dome, about the plants, about why the rain never stopped. Niari answered each one patiently, weaving stories that were part science, part fairy tale. The 72 hours passed in a blur of preparations. Barry created false histories, backdated medical records, constructed an elaborate fiction that would stand up to scrutiny. Niari organized their living space to look lived in, established, permanent. Kra, unaware of the danger, simply enjoyed having two parents for the first time in her life. The night before the inspection, Barry found himself unable to sleep. He went to the observation deck and was unsurprised to find Niari already there. Nervous? She asked. Terrified, he admitted. She moved closer, not quite touching, but near enough that he could feel her warmth. I've been thinking about what happens after. If we survive this. When? Barry corrected. When we survive this. Niari smiled. Slightly. When we survive this, what then? Do we just continue the performance? Barry considered the question. 3 weeks ago, he would have had a simple answer. Now, Kra called me Poppy yesterday, he said instead of answering. Like it was the most natural thing in the world. She's never had a father. Not really. Niari paused. Neither of us has had a home. Not really. Is that what this is? Home. Niari turned to face him fully. You tell me. Barry thought about the empty years, the isolation, the way his life had been measured in tasks completed and days survived. Then he thought about Kra's laugh, about shared meals, about the way Niari hummed while she worked. Yes, he said simply. It's home. The inspection came with the morning. The officers were thorough, scanning every system, every room, every record. They questioned Barry and Niari separately, looking for inconsistencies. They observed Kra, took more biological readings, cross-referenced data with off-world databases. Barry watched it all with forced calm, acutely aware that their lives hung on the fiction he'd created. Beside him, Niari held Kra's hand, answering questions with practiced ease. They looked, he realized, exactly like what they claimed to be, a small family living quietly in exile, bothering no one, asking for nothing but the right to exist. Finally, after 3 hours that felt like 3 years, the lead officer approached them. Your documentation appears to be in order, she said, her tone suggesting this wasn't the outcome she'd hoped for. However, we'll be maintaining regular monitoring of this facility. Of course, Barry replied. We have nothing to hide. The officer's gaze lingered on Kra, who stared back with those unusual, intelligent eyes. For a moment, Barry tensed, ready for the worst. Then the officer turned away. Maintain compliance. Any violations will result in immediate termination of your exile status. They left without another word. Barry waited until their ship disappeared into the storm before allowing himself to breathe. Is it over? Niari asked. For now. Barry knelt beside Kra, who had been remarkably patient throughout the ordeal. You did perfectly, little one. Kra grinned. I was quiet like Mama said. Papa, can we look at the glowflowers now? The word Papa settled into Barry's chest like a warm stone. He stood, offering his hand. Of course we can. As they walked toward the greenhouse, Niari fell in a step beside him. Thank you, she said quietly. For all of it. You don't need to thank me. We're family now. The words came easily, naturally. Family takes care of each other. Niari slipped her hand into his free one. It was the first time she'd voluntarily touched him since that impulsive kiss. Barry squeezed gently, a promise without words. In the greenhouse, Kra ran ahead, exclaiming over each bioluminescent bloom. Barry began explaining the genetic modifications that created the different colors, the way nutrients flowed through synthetic chlorophyll, the delicate balance that kept it all alive. Niari listened too, asking questions that showed a sharp scientific mind. You can help with the research, Barry offered. With your background in archives, in historical patterns, there's so much we could discover together. Niari's eyes lit up. You trust me with your work? Our work, Barry corrected. This is our home, our future. That night, after Kra was asleep, Barry and Niari sat together in the observation deck, watching the endless rain. The storm seemed less oppressive now, more like a protective curtain shielding their small world. I've been thinking, Niari said slowly, about what you said, about being a family. Barry waited. When I asked you to marry me, I said I wasn't asking for love. I meant that. But she turned to face him. Things change. People change. Barry's heart raced. What are you saying? I'm saying that somewhere between desperate strangers and whatever we are now, I started to care, really care, about this place, about the life we're building, about you. Barry reached for her hand. I thought I knew what loneliness was. 5 years in exile, I thought I'd made peace with it. Then you and Kra appeared, and I realized I hadn't been living at all, just existing. Niari laced her fingers through his. So what do we do now? Now, Barry smiled. Now we live, really live, together. She leaned into him, her head finding the curve of his shoulder, as if it had always belonged there. Outside, the rain continued its ancient rhythm, but inside their dome, their home, everything was warm and bright and possible. Weeks turned to months. The conquest monitoring became routine, their suspicion fading as Barry's careful documentation proved unassailable. Kra thrived, her unique biology adapting to the engineered environment. She grew stronger, taller, her mind absorbing everything Barry and Niari could teach her. The dome itself began to change. What had been Barry's sterile sanctuary transformed into something alive, dynamic. Niari introduced art to the walls, color to the common spaces. Kra's drawings covered the refrigeration unit. Shared meals became events, conversations flowing as freely as the recycled water in the hydroponic systems. Barry's research flourished too. With Niari's help, he began to understand patterns in the biological adaptations, connections between the artificial ecosystem and the planet's native evolution. Kra, with her hybrid genetics, became not a subject but a collaborator, her insights often startling in their clarity. One evening, as they worked together in the lab, Kra looked up from the microscope she'd learned to use with surprising skill. Papa, why do the plants glow? Barry smiled at the familiar question. Because I taught them to little scientists, just like I'm teaching you. Can you teach anything to grow? With enough time and care, yes. Kra considered this. Like how you and Mama taught our family to grow. Barry's throat tightened. He looked across the lab to where Niari was documenting their latest findings, her face illuminated by the soft green light of the bioscreens. Exactly like that, he said softly. That night, as they prepared for bed in the quarters that had somehow become naturally shared, Niari caught Barry's hand. I love you, she said simply. I thought you should know. Barry had heard those words before, in his old life, from people who hadn't meant them. But here, now, from this woman who had trusted him with everything, they hit him like a revelation. I love you too, he replied, and meant it more than he'd ever meant anything. Their kiss was soft, unhurried, a seal on something that had been building since that first desperate request. When they finally pulled apart, Niari was smiling. So what happens now? She asked, echoing her question from months before. Barry glanced toward Kra's room, where their daughter slept peacefully, then back to his wife, his real wife now, not just in law but in truth. Now we keep growing, he said, together. The next morning brought an unexpected communication. Barry's old research station on the main continent had detected some of his work. The enzymes he'd created for Kra had triggered dormant sensors in the medical database. The automated system had filed a report, potential breakthrough in hybrid biological compatibility. They'll come investigate, Niari said, reading over his shoulder. But Barry felt no fear, only possibility. Let them. We have nothing to hide anymore. The science team that arrived 2 weeks later wasn't military. They were researchers, doctors bearing credentials from the medical corps. Their lead scientist, a woman named Dr. Sarah Chun, reviewed Barry's work with growing excitement. This could change everything, she said, studying the enzyme profiles. There are thousands of children like your daughter, hidden away or worse. Your research could give them normal lives. Barry looked at Kra, who was showing the younger scientist her collection of bioluminescent specimens. That's all any parent wants. Dr. Chen's expression softened. The medical review board, is prepared to offer you conditional reinstatement. Your exile would be commuted to restricted research status. You could continue your work officially this time. And my family? Full citizenship for all three of you. Your daughter would be protected under medical necessity provisions. Barry found Niari's eyes across the room. She nodded slightly. We accept, he said. The transition wasn't immediate. There were forms to file, bureaucracy to navigate, skeptics to convince. But slowly, carefully, Barry's work began to spread. The enzymes were synthesized, distributed, tested. Children who had been dying began to thrive. Families came out of hiding. Through it all, Barry, Niari, and Kra remained in their dome. It had been upgraded now, better equipment, official status, regular supply drops. But at its heart, it was still their home. Do you ever regret it? Niari asked one evening as they watched Kra teach a group of visiting children about the glowing plants. Saying yes to a stranger's desperate request. Barry pulled her close. Saying yes to you was the first real decision I'd made in years. Everything good in my life started with that moment. Even when I was asking you to lie, to risk everything, you weren't asking me to lie. You were asking me to tell a deeper truth. That family isn't just about blood or law. It's about choice. About deciding to stand together when the whole universe wants to tear you apart. Kra ran over then, grabbing both their hands. Mama, Papa, come see. The new hybrid seedlings are sprouting. They let themselves be pulled along, laughing at their daughter's enthusiasm. In the greenhouse, surrounded by impossible life, thriving against all odds, Barry understood that this moment, this place, these people, was what he'd been working toward all along. The dome still stood against the endless reign of Illustra's 7, but it was no longer a prison or a place of exile. It was a beginning of a laboratory of love and science intertwined, a home that sheltered not just 3 lives, but the hope for thousands more. As night fell and the bioluminescent gardens awakened in waves of living light, Barry stood with his wife and daughter, watching their small world glow against the darkness. The rain continued its eternal song, but they were warm, safe, together. Papa, Kra said sleepily, leaning against his leg. Tell me again about how our family grew. Barry smiled, lifting her into his arms as Niari pressed close beside them. Well, little scientist, it started with someone very brave who asked for help, and someone very lonely who said yes. The story had become legend in their household, told and retold, each version adding new details, new understanding. But the heart of it remained the same. Sometimes the most profound changes come from the simplest acts of trust, and the families we choose can be stronger than the ones we're born into. In the soft light of their improbable home, Barry began the tale again, Niari adding her own memories, Kra asking questions despite knowing all the answers. Outside, Illustra's 7 continued its ancient patterns of storm and rain. But inside, in the warm glow of engineered life and chosen love, a different kind of growth flourished, slower than the plants, deeper than the research, more vital than any discovery. They were no longer exiles or refugees, no longer desperate strangers bound by circumstance. They were what they had chosen to become, a family, a future, a small light burning steadily against the darkness, proving that even in the most unlikely ground, with enough care and courage, anything can grow. The dome wasn't just sheltering them anymore. It had become what homes are meant to be, not a hiding place, but a starting point, a place where love takes root and reaches toward tomorrow, where 3 lives intertwined had created something larger than any of them could have imagined alone. As sleep finally claimed them all, the bioluminescent garden pulsed gently with living light, a heartbeat of hope in the endless rain, a promise that no storm, neither nature's nor humanity's, could extinguish what had been cultivated here with such patience, trust, and love. The beginning, indeed.